what started this right now, the independence debate to become so fierce, is the fact that there is a disconnection and people can't get involved, can't be active citizens. So this is a sort of revolt to say we do matter and we do want to affect the future and make the future a better place. So I think it's definitely involved with that.
Gaelic Bio. Mar chainachan Kathleen Maud. Crimich and Darna Tuv, Upper and Landu, Gentausery, Postabale na Gaihe. Gaelic Bio, a Ganyan Gachsayet, si Strepen and Sheehan, Fure and Darich for Hachlish, a Soul and Doolanach, a Sheenu, Gafari Fatas, si Shirig na Fari Fatas, Lasserbuan, Jekach na Bradjach. Narinach Gavisurda Gravras, ach Gentause, she upper a hound a bit Downse. Gaelic is alive. In memoriam, Kathleen Maud. Let's put aside today's work and dance to the wind's Postabale. Gaelic is alive, despite all arrows. She climbs the hillside, sapling of oak in her arms, her defiant eyes reaching the far-off horizon. She aims for the far-off horizon, a bright, lasting star in her breast. Defend her from too bold a leap, but be dancing, be dancing. It is work to be dancing. The politics that have featured in my poetry have been to do with the survival of the future of the health of the Gaelic language. But that itself, I think, draws you into a kind of engagement with authority. And I became, I suppose you could say, I became quite a vehement, in a positive way, I'd like to think, Gaelic activist for a number of years. I campaigned very strongly for developments in the recognition of Gaelic, particularly in Gaelic education. My stance on the referendum is most definitely yes. I like to see the eyebrows of friends raise when I say to them, better together is an excellent slogan, but it's an unfinished sentence. Better together as equal partners, possibly in a British Federation, but certainly in Europe, in the United Nations, in the British Commonwealth. It's topical as we speak because the Commonwealth Games going on in Scotland, in fact, with a lot of very much smaller independent nations than Scotland taking part. So we live with the hope that that might itself have an impact on how people view the whole question. The British Federation of Nations necessarily either, if they all are agreed to work together, the expression in unity is strength applies to separate countries. That's why the European Union has come together. That's why you guys are from the United States of America, aren't you? Where there were initially independent separate states that confederated and eventually came together.
My impression is that on the whole, Scotland welcomes people from other parts of the world. My parents are English, but I was born and brought up in Scotland, and I feel that my identity is Scottish, an outward-looking Scottishness. And I feel that at the moment, Scottish politics are quite divergent from English politics, in the sense that we have a right-wing government here in Westminster, in Britain, and it seems to me that it's moving further and further to the right. We have the advent of UKIP as a party, which is the UK Independence Party, and they've been getting quite a lot of votes in the European elections here recently. They stand for coming out of Europe. Scotland as a nation has had long ties with Europe, and I think that Scotland would choose to stay in Europe. There's going to be a referendum in 2015, a British referendum, which is after the Scottish referendum on independence. And that referendum will be whether the British people want to stay in Europe or come out of the European Union. And that's a very tricky one, because I think it's possible that the English population, which is considerably bigger than the Scottish population, could vote for us to come out of Europe. And I think that would be very sad and not a good idea on any level. I think the Scottish people would vote differently if we stay within the United Kingdom. If the referendum in Scotland is a no vote, I think that the Scottish will definitely vote no to coming out of Europe. They would want to stay.
I think Britain still seems to have a bit of an ego. So when we talk about this establishment, there's a bit of an establishment ego. It's very Eton boys, it's very elitist, and that's the system that we have in Britain, and that's who runs Britain. And they still have this idea that Britain is like this sort of kind of still a bit imperialistic. So I think they've got hangovers from empire, and they still sort of like parts of their ego believe that we are still like an empire, and that they want to be best buddies with America. And I think that America's also delusional in terms of the American establishment, Britain establishment, totally delusional. And they think that they are this big power in the world. Now, obviously, by Scotland becoming independent, we host the nuclear weapons for the whole of the UK and Scotland. So by voting yes, and there's already been a commitment from the Scottish Government that we will be free of nuclear weapons by 2020. So that's a big signal to the rest of the world, actually, that Scotland has, nuclear free. But there's not really any place they've found yet to host the weapons in the rest of the UK. So potentially the UK would have to give up its nuclear weapons. Now, they like to be part of the big players in the world that see nuclear weapons as being part of a great nation. I don't think it's great at all. I think it's ridiculous. So it's all of that is actually more about, I think it's more about actually how the UK or Britain looks to the outside world. And it's a bit of like, they'd be a bit embarrassed if Scotland became independent, because it's a signal to the rest of the world that Britain is no longer a great power and that people don't want to be associated with it. People don't like the way it is. Whereas by holding on to it, they have some sense of Britain is still great and we're all doing okay. And they can hold on to that delusional ideal. So a lot of it is wrapped up in that sentiment, and it's more about how Britain looks to the outside world and wants to be connected to America, whereas obviously Scotland, or a lot of the activists in the Yes campaign, we want to be Europeans, we're happy to be a small nation, we look to the Nordics, we want to be fairer, we're not interested in being a big power in the world, we're just happy to be, a force for good in terms of a more peaceful nation, a fairer nation, and we can contribute in the world stage, but in a different way to the way that the UK contributes. So, I think for me that kind of sums it up in terms of how you're seeing the divide of both sides of the campaign.
Daylight, and the winter gives the spring. Aye, the linty and the corby cry on summer's golden wing. Aye, the barney tells a story for the ocean waves to sing. Love is strong and love is gentle, Welcome on, old love's a handsel, like the dark night turns to daylight.